to you and your pet. I'm Jim Horton, and we're here with our resident expert, Dr. Ernest Rogers of the Maplewood Animal Hospital. And we deal in a wide range of pet issues, from health to behavior and general care. Let's focus this particular show on fall and winter issues and then holiday pet dangers. How does the change in seasons affect the pets and feral animals?
Well, it seems normally what we have when we have feral animals, they're outside all the time. They're affected by the heat, they're affected by the cold, but particularly as the seasons change, you'll see them develop heavier coats. They'll be more likely to nest and find a place to hide out. But particularly when the snow comes, they need additional shelter. They'll hide under houses, in garages, under decks, wherever they can find some warmth or get out of the elements. Indoor pets have less of an issue with that. Of course, they have other issues. Indoor pets, when they come inside, they get less exercise in the winter, often because the owners don't want to go out in the winter, but also because there's just less of an friendly environment to run around in. So when you have an indoor pet, they tend to get less activity, not always, but in general they get less activity. When you turn on your heat, you have a dry heat often, or if you have forced air or ventilation heat, often there's dust coming out of the registers, and sometimes this can cause an animal to have sneezing and itching and all kinds of problems. Clearly the heat itself without humidity can cause dry skin, and I'm seeing an awful lot of that. But the other thing we have to realize, difference between feral animals being outside and animals being inside. Feral animals, when they're outside and we've had too cold frosts, basically most of the mosquitoes and fleas are gone. Inside animals come in, it's still 70 degrees in the house, so the fleas are going, hey, love this, and they just sort of hang out, and you can get a flea infestation, and that's when you tend to find it more often. I don't know how many times I've had animals come in the last 3 weeks with flea problems and dry skin, and so those are the differences really as the seasons change. Those are the differences between the feral and the inside pet animals.
So what can we do to help the inside pets during these changes?
Well, I think certainly I like to tell all my clients that pets, dogs and cats, don't have sweat glands. They tend to have oil glands. The more you brush them, the more likely you are to get that heavy, thick coat that's coming in the winter, that heavy, thick coat, all the dead hair out. It stimulates the oil glands and it really stimulates the skin. And so you tend to not to get as much dry skin. There's no 100% solution for dry skin, but that is something on the way that it'll help. Continue using flea medication on the inside dog and cat is sometimes helpful. And then, of course, making sure that they get their exercise. A lot of homeowners like to salt their walks, and of course our communities, both South Orange and Maplewood, will salt, and people will salt their sidewalks, and this salt can cause problems with the feet. So when an inside dog goes outside, one thing you want to do is wipe his feet. The outside feral pets, obviously, you don't want to wipe their feet because then they're wet and they have problems. But those are some of the issues that we see with animals as the season changes. The inside pets in particular have a real problem with the dryness in the air, or can. So a humidifier is nice to have, but certainly brushing them and making sure that they get their exercises is also a good regimen to start.
Well, what general house preparation should be made to ensure an owner and pet's health indoors?
Well, I think the humidifier is a big thing that'll help. Certainly when you have an animal indoors and it's not getting its exercise, it might not eat as well, it might not drink as thoroughly as it should, or maybe drink more because of the dryness. I think to keep up your health, you really want to make sure that your animal, if there are fleas, you're treating for fleas. If there are other problems in the house, such as dryness or dust, or if the animal is just having problems, you occasionally have people who store their cars in the garage. And if the car is leaking antifreeze, the animal can take 2 licks of that, and that'll affect his or her kidneys. Certainly people who find in the winter when mice who would otherwise be outside or inside. They tend to put out mice and rat traps, and that can affect the animal. So I think we have to just be aware, monitor our animal is the biggest thing.
Okay. So what about things like an escape plan in the case of fire and that sort of things?
Excellent point. That's true no matter whether it's cold or not cold, but certainly any time a disaster has the potential to occur, one should have their pet in mind. Sometimes, as we saw in Louisiana, we saw that many of the pets had to be left behind because they didn't have a plan. So certainly if you're worried about some kind of a disaster, some kind of a power surge or power outage, being isolated by a snowfall, I think you have to make sure that you're well stocked on your pet food, on fresh water for your pet. Sometimes in these cases the water is cut off to our houses. We also have to have water for our pets. We have to make sure that if our pets are on any medication, that we have sufficient medications for our pets. Certainly there's no 100% way to protect everyone, but every pet, but certainly if we have a pet that in the house, then we should be aware of its needs. And in the case, unfortunately, in the case of a fire in the house, which I tend to hear of it more often around Christmas, and that might be because people are using heaters, maybe because people are Christmas trees that are improperly lit. But no matter what the situation, if there's a fire, it's really important that you try and get your animal out. Now, that doesn't always happen. One trick I've learned for my cat is the treat bag. Every time I want to find my cat, I crinkle the treat bag, and when I crinkle the treat bag, the cat says, "Oh, treats," and comes to my feet, and I give her some treats, give him some treats. So he knows that the crinkling of the treat bag is a sign to come and see me. One of the things you can use if you have to leave your house and you can't find your cat, if you've trained them in that way, crinkling the treat bag, the cat will come. Similarly to a dog, although dogs tend to be at your feet looking for food anyways. So I think realistically the cat is the more challenging one to find. And using that crinkle technique might well help you. If you think your cat's outside and you crinkle it and the cat comes to you, it'll come from outside or inside as long as it hears the crinkling. So I think that's to your point. If there's a fire or a disaster in the house, or you have to leave your house and you don't want to leave your pet behind, if the heat fails, then that crinkle treat might help you get the cat. And then, of course, worst comes to worst, you wrap them in a blanket or in a towel and try and put them in some kind of a container, whether it's a cage or even a box, just to get them out of there and have some control.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What can be done to help out feral and outside pets, the outside cat, for example?
Well, there's outside cats. There are people who seem to feel that it's okay to leave their dogs outside all winter. And for long-haired dogs, I've had huskies that love to go outside and just lay in the snow. Cats, on the other hand, they will develop a heavier coat of fur. But for the feral cats in Maplewood, and I had a conversation today, the way to ensure that the feral cats survive the winter is we have to give them some shelter. Apparently there's some organizations in South Orange, Maplewood, that are involved in the trap, neuter, and release program. I don't have 100% confidence that that is the best way to go, but that's what's available. So anyone who wants to help feral cats, if they can get in touch through the health department in Maplewood with one of these groups, then they will advise you on how to take care of these cats. But my advice is shelter, whether you can find a dog house or an igloo or whatever, and you can fill it with straw, which is relatively cheap at any farm implement. It keeps them dry and wet. Make sure that there's a towel or something occluding the door that they can still get through. And then, of course, making sure that they have food. The food should be a dry type food because obviously canned food will freeze. Water is, you can't just put water out, it just won't work. It'll freeze, and often they will eat snow. But feral cats really need shelter. They need warmth, either from straw or from hay that you put in there so they can bury themselves. And then they need food.
Okay. What are some of the important issues with respect to fall house and cat preparation that may affect car preparation that may affect cat pets?
Well, we sort of touched on that by saying that the issues surrounding antifreeze. People don't recognize the danger of antifreeze. In my senior year of medical school, we had a dog that came in and he had gotten into some antifreeze and unfortunately he died. But when we palpated his kidneys or just felt his kidneys, it felt like a bag of marbles. And that's because antifreeze is sweet. Dogs and cats like to lick it, and it only takes a couple of laps, tablespoon in fact, for it to poison a cat, and a little bit more to poison a dog, but they all have consequences no matter how little they take it. And these sweet chemicals get into the bloodstream, they're filtered out by the kidneys, and then they form crystals in the kidneys, basically destroying the kidney. So that's one of the big problems. Anyone who has a car, we know that in the winter we come home, our car is warm, we get out of our car, we go into our house, we come out of our house. Our car might still be warm enough that a cat will climb up under the hood. So my recommendation there is, especially in the winter, especially on the cold days, but any day, if you hit your car, hit the hood of your car before you get into it, or if you get in, beep your horn before you start the car. Because there are several issues, well, as you know, there are several things going on in the car. The fan belt can rip a cat, and I've seen those injuries. Spark plugs, if they happen to have some missing insulation, can electrocute a cat. Certainly, if the cat can't get out and sits there, the engine gets very, very hot and burns the cat. So we know there are a lot of issues that can surround a cat that would climb up under the hood. So just pounding on the hood, beeping the horn, giving it a second before you turn on the engine, often will scare them out, and you'll save yourself having to deal with an injured cat.
Okay. And what should a person do if he or she suspects animal poisoning?
Well, poisoning can occur in a lot of different ways. Obviously, salt on the street when the animal licks its feet can cause some mild gastrointestinal or stomach upset. The antifreeze, rat poison, we often find, especially in the spring, but in the late fall and early winter, people will throw food on the ground. It'll get wet and it'll develop bacteria. This bacteria can cause problems. It's not as much a poisoning as it is a gastrointestinal issue. If you think for whatever reason your animal has gotten into poisons, and this is more of an issue around the holidays, and we'll talk about that next. But if you think your animal has gotten into some kind of house poisoning, it's very important that you at least contact your veterinarian, either at the emergency clinic or your regular veterinarian.
All right. We only have a few seconds left, but is there anything else that's important consideration in decreasing temperatures? Anything else we should be aware of?
I think, and I said last time, and I know you raised your eyebrows, but I think animals who are normally inside should be brought in at around 50 to 55 degrees. Feral animals can live outside almost all the time, but that's sort of my guideline, just to be sure that your animal is going to be safe and comfortable.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time for this first section, so we'll start talking about holiday and pet dangers right after the break. Is there anything else you wish to add at this point?
If you have any questions, feel free to call me or email me at maplewoodAH@comcast.net.
Okay. We'll be right back.
After 17 years working as a mason, Mike was laid off. I met him when he came into the library looking for help. He found a job opening, but the application was only online. Mike said he'd spent his entire life around tools, but had never used a computer. I showed him how, and he ended up applying for numerous jobs online. I saw Mike the other day. His new computer skills paid off. He's working again.
New Jersey libraries are transforming lives. Tell us your story.
Welcome back to You and Your Pets with Dr. Ernest Rogers of the Maplewood Animal Hospital. Let's change our focus in this second half to holiday issues for our feline and canine pets. What are some of the common dangers associated with upcoming Thanksgiving and other winter celebrations?
Well, we understand that we love to eat. I mean, the holidays are about eating, whether you're celebrating Hanukkah, whether you're celebrating Christmas, whether you're celebrating some other religious ceremony. Thanksgiving is a big eating holiday. I think what we don't realize is how much fat there is in a lot of the food that we eat. So turkey gravy, people like to give that to their dogs, and a little bit isn't going to hurt a dog or a cat, but too much can induce an inflammation in the pancreas called pancreatitis. Certainly when people cook, whether it's brisket, whether it's turkey, chicken, goose, they often use string to tie up these animals. I guess they aren't animals anymore.
Tie the legs.
Tie the legs
Right.
and hold the stuffing in. And the problem is they cut the string off and throw it in the garbage. Well, when a dog or a cat gets hold of that, they think, oh, it's just chewy good. By swallowing it, that is some of the worst intestinal obstructions I've seen, mostly because the string or the cord will go down in the intestine. Sometimes it gets stuck on the tongue, which can cause a serious problem. Other times it's swallowed whole and gets stuck in the stomach, and it causes little holes by sawing back and forth throughout the intestines. And some of the worst obstructions I've seen, because string will cause an obstruction even though things can get past it. One of the worst obstructions I've seen is when I had to go in and fix about 5 or 6 different holes. So every time there was a little hole, I had to go in, cut the string, pull it out, sew it up, go to the next little hole, cut the string, pull it out. And so the string, the fat, the skin in some cases is probably not the best thing to give our pets. So that's one big thing about Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah and other holidays at this time. We love to eat. Some of the things that we have to deal with are candies. And though we love candies, we all know that chocolate is poisonous to our dogs and cats. Most of the chocolate that we get in the candy store or over the counter is often carob or sugar sweetened chocolate. It's not necessarily real chocolate. But at this time of year, we tend to use things like baker's chocolate, that dark chocolate. That's poisonous to cats and dogs. And one of the signs is that they get hyperactive, their heart starts racing. It's almost like super caffeine for a cat or a dog. So those are things we have to worry about. A lot of our diabetic members who live in South Orange and Maplewood use not sweetened candy, but it's sweetened with xylitol, and xylitol is poisonous to dogs. Macadamia nuts are poisonous to dogs, and we're just talking the food sense. There are other plants that can also be poisonous to dogs and cats. So I think when we start talking about holidays in which we support eating, and July 4th is one of those, our dogs overeating or getting the wrong foods can cause problems. It can range anywhere from slight gastrointestinal upset where they have a little diarrhea and vomiting and it's gone in 24 hours to a serious blockage where they have potential to die.
Okay, if the owner suspects their animal has gotten into the candy and the food, what should they do?
Well, clearly if it's gone in 24 hours and you know it's not a poison, in other words, it's not xylitol, it's not chocolate, it's not macadamia nuts, then I think we can wait 24 hours and see if it resolves itself. Don't treat it, just see if it resolves itself. Hold food. If it's an adult dog, you can hold food for 8 to 10 hours and then start feeding them small meals after that. And if it hasn't resolved in 24 hours, then I would say at least contact your veterinarian. Let him or her know that it's either getting better or not getting better, but let him give you some guidance after 24 hours. Certainly after 24 hours, if the diarrhea is continuing, especially if it's light in color, or if the animal seems to be in pain around its abdomen, or if the animal is straining to poop, or if there's blood in the poop, or if the animal's vomiting, continues to vomit after 24 hours. That's something that I probably would just, as a civilian, I would take it to my veterinarian for at least an evaluation. Because at that point, we still have a chance to intervene and maybe do an outpatient intervention rather than having to bring the animal into the hospital.
Okay. So what other issues exist that may affect pets
Well,
during the holidays?
We all know about the Christmas tree and the cats. I don't put up a Christmas tree because I know my cat would climb up and knock it down. My cat is a little bit silly. Certainly when we have Christmas trees, we have a potential for three things. One, the cat can knock the tree down. Two, the ornaments themselves, and maybe I'm showing my age, but some of the ornaments that my mom used to put up were glass, and some of the ornaments are, most of them I would imagine now are plastic, but the bulbs can be glass and they can break.
Right.
And then of course the third issue is the electrical cord going to the tree. Cats normally don't chew on electrical outlets or electrical cables, but in this case they may well do it. Another thing that we have to be concerned about, if we do have live trees and we put water in the base of the trees, cats and dogs may try and drink that water, and that will give them intestinal upset. So those are some of the things that might be associated with a Christmas tree. Now, when you're celebrating Hanukkah, most people use a menorah, and though we had an electric menorah with little light bulbs in it, other people use actual candles. So a cat jumping on the table, knocking over a candle, can be a hazard to the house, to the cat. They can burn themselves. And of course, again, we have all the food elements. The other thing that can happen in any house, of course, is we like poinsettias, or poinsettias, depending on who you are. But there are lilies, there are other plants, and I have a list of them available on, I think it's a website for the ASPCA, and they will discuss all the plants that are disastrous or poisonous to pets. So poinsettias should be put up out of the way. Lilies, if you get them, should be out of the way. Live trees, make sure you cover the base. So we have a lot of issues that can occur around Christmas, around the holiday season.
Okay, any other additional precautions that should be undertaken that we haven't discussed at this point?
Well, I think I'm really concerned anytime an animal is in the house that we monitor them, because people and guests, and this is a party season as well, people and guests tend to have a real problem with coming in and saying, oh, one little bite won't hurt. Well, one little bite from 30 different people, the cat or the dog isn't going to say no, and next thing you know, your dog has a little bit of stomach upset. So I think cautioning your guests, monitoring your pets is really, really important. After that, it's the outside surroundings, making sure that your pets are doing okay outside. Monitor them outside.
Okay. Some people keep their animals tied up outside even during the winter. And how should someone who's worried about animal cruelty respond to that?
That's sort of a difficult question. Some dogs do fine outside. Tying them up is not appropriate. But if they have free run of a yard or a pen, and they have shelter and they have water, it might not be considered cruelty. It's difficult. People sometimes get overburdened with the situation that an animal is outside and it's being cruel. Certainly you have every right to respond, and it's the NJSPCA, New Jersey State SPCA, and they have an 800 number on their website. And that NJSPCA number will put you in touch with either a dispatcher or an officer who will then take your information, and you have to give them your information. You can do it anonymously, but they prefer when they can follow up, and all the information about the animal. And they will, in most cases, if they can ascertain by the telephone call that this is a potential cruelty situation, then they will certainly send an officer to investigate. Around this time of year, many dogs get sick, and unfortunately people just abandon them. And that clearly is a cruelty situation. Abandoning a dog in your house, and unfortunately some people just don't have the money to maintain their residence, and they leave their dog or cat in the house. That's a situation that's considered cruelty. So the NJSPCA, or you can call your police, and the local animal control officer can help investigate this situation.
By the way, that NJSPCA number is 1-800-562-5979. That's 1-800-562-5979.
And they'll be happy to help you and guide you through the process. I don't think most people try to be cruel. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't think all people try to be cruel to their animals, but sometimes we view as what they're doing as cruel. A Rottweiler outside in below zero temperature is difficult and probably not appropriate. Doesn't necessarily mean it's cruel if he has the proper housing, proper water, and proper food. But it's probably not what everyone would do. I've seen people as cruel with cats and throwing water on cats in the winter, which is very cruel. I've heard of people, well, I've had cats that have come in with BBs in them and pellets in them. So we know that there is cruelty out there. I don't think it's common or associated with the holidays that we're going into, but certainly we know that it can happen. I think the other thing about the holidays is just understanding that particularly, we haven't talked about birds, but particularly geese and snow geese and Canada geese, feeding them bread can be hazardous to their health. If you really want to feed them appropriate food, corn, seeds, but bread, when it sits for a while, will become moldy and that can cause problems for them.
Okay. We've just about covered everything that we wanted to talk about. Is there anything else on the holidays that come to mind?
Well, I think we're all going to be enjoying the holidays. We're all going to be leaving and going places. I think boarding your pet is very, very important. I prefer, even though I do boarding at the Maplewood Animal Hospital, I usually advise my clients that if they could get someone to come into their house once or twice a day, or 3 times a day for a dog, even once a day for a cat, the animal would do so much better when they're at home. However, if they can't do that, or if they don't trust people to come into their house, and they choose to board with me or one of the other boarding facilities, and I think most veterinarians do board, and there are other boarding facilities in and around Maplewood, South Orange, Union, I think we have to understand that animals that go in for boarding potentially can get diarrhea simply because of a change of environment, change in water. It's not the boarding person's fault. Dogs get off their schedule, they sometimes pee and poop in the cage, and once they're off their schedule, they come back home and they might also be having problems. So over this Christmas season, if you're going to board your animal, be prepared, bring the food to the boarding facility, let them know if it needs any special care, let them know how often it's walked, and how we have to support that animal when he's at our facilities.
Okay, well, we've just about run out of time. I want to thank you very much, and if people have questions, they can
always email me at maplewoodAH, that's Animal Hospital, at comcast.net.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to send them a response.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been You and Your Pet. I'm Jim Horton with Dr. Ernest Rogers. Thank you for watching.